Caryl Churchill's Cloud 9, 1979, is a revolutionary and provocative play that explores gender roles, sexual identity, colonialism, and social transformation. Structured in two distinct acts that span centuries, Act 1 in Victorian colonial Africa and Act 2 in 1970s London, the play confronts the social constructions of gender, race, and sexuality through radical theatrical techniques, including cross-gender and cross-racial casting and non-linear time. Through biting satire, absurdist humor, and Brechtian devices, Churchill critiques the oppressive ideologies of patriarchy and imperialism. The play is celebrated for its bold experimentation, feminist vision, and queer theatricality, making it one of the most important works of postmodern British theatre. Structure and form. The play is divided into two acts with contrasting time periods and settings. Act 1 takes place in British-occupied Africa during the Victorian era. Act 2, set in 1979 London, nearly a century later, though only 25 years have passed for the characters. This surreal time jump allows Churchill to explore how social norms evolve, or don't, and to juxtapose colonial repression with modern liberation movements. The use of non-naturalistic casting, for instance, a man playing a woman, a white actor playing a black character, or a boy played by a woman, underscores the performative nature of identity. Act 1, Colonial Africa and Repression. Set in Victorian-era British colonial Africa, Act 1 introduces Clive, a government official managing a remote outpost. He is the embodiment of imperialist and patriarchal authority, upholding British values, family hierarchy, and racial superiority. Characters: Clive, patriarch, colonial administrator, staunch imperialist. Betty, Clive's wife, played by a man to emphasize that Victorian femininity is a male construct. Edward, their son, played by a woman, expressing gender nonconformity. Joshua, a black servant, played by a white actor, trained to emulate British manners and suppress his culture. Maud, Betty's mother, conservative and classist. Ellen, the governess, who is in love with Betty. Harry Bagley, an explorer and closeted homosexual who engages in secret affairs. Mrs. Saunders, a confident, sexually liberated widow. Key plot points. Clive governs his family and household as he does the colony, with rigid rules and control. Betty is repressed, internalizing patriarchal ideals and denying her desires, including a romantic tension with Ellen. Edward is effeminate, plays with dolls, and resists Clive's attempts to make him manly. Joshua, the black servant, suppresses his own identity to please Clive, claiming, "My skin is black but oh my soul is white." Harry Bagley has sexual encounters with Edward, Joshua, and Clive's wife Betty, representing the hidden queer undercurrents beneath Victorian morality. Mrs. Saunders asserts independence and resists Clive's authority, representing a challenge to traditional female roles. Climax. The act ends with the characters gathered at a Christmas party. Clive tries to maintain control while Joshua turns a gun on Clive, a dramatic symbol of revolt against imperial and patriarchal authority. The act closes in symbolic violence, revealing the implosion of the social order Clive defends. Act 2, 1979 London and Liberation. Act 2 leaps forward to contemporary London, though only 25 years have passed for the characters. The setting is no longer the exotic, other, of Africa but the urban, chaotic, and sexually liberated West. Characters: Betty, now played by a woman, having left Clive and trying to find herself. Edward, now openly gay and exploring his identity. Victoria, previously a doll in Act 1, now a full-fledged woman grappling with feminism and relationships. Lynn, a working-class lesbian mother and Victoria's lover. Martin, Victoria's husband, a liberal man trying to reconcile his own masculinity. Kathy, Lynn's violent young daughter, played by a man. Jerry, Edward's former lover, now navigating the gay scene and grappling with monogamy. Key plot points. Betty has left her oppressive marriage and is seeking personal and sexual autonomy. Edward works in a nursery and has embraced his gay identity, though he faces challenges in relationships. Victoria is caught between her marriage to Martin and her attraction to Lynn. She explores feminist thought and same-sex desire. Lynn is assertive and politically engaged, having left an abusive male partner. The characters explore sexual freedom, gender fluidity, parenting, polyamory, and identity politics. Betty's monologue at the end reveals a late-in-life awakening to her own sexuality and personhood. Climax and ending. The act ends with a symbolic embrace between Betty and her younger self, representing reconciliation, self-acceptance, and liberation from past constraints. Character analysis. Clive. In Act 1, Clive is the embodiment of British imperialism and patriarchal control. He dictates gender roles, punishes deviation, and upholds colonial superiority. Churchill uses Clive to critique hegemonic masculinity, colonial violence, and the delusion of control. His absence in Act 2 emphasizes the collapse of his worldview. The world he defended no longer holds authority, replaced by chaos, complexity, and transformation. Betty. In Act 1, Betty is played by a man to underscore that her femininity is constructed by male expectations. She suppresses her desires and subordinates herself to Clive. In Act 2, played by a woman, Betty has left her marriage and seeks to redefine herself outside patriarchal definitions. Her journey symbolizes the struggles of women navigating post-patriarchal life, liberated but unsure. Her final monologue reveals the pain of repression and the tentative joy of self-discovery. I used to think Clive was the only man I could ever love. I used to think I couldn't survive without a man. Edward. Played by a woman in Act 1 to reflect his gender nonconformity, Edward is mocked for his femininity and queer tendencies. Clive's disapproval looms large. In Act 2, Edward is openly gay, but still navigating internalized shame and longing for connection. He resists monogamy, experiments with relationships, and works in a childcare profession, challenging traditional masculinity. Edward's journey reflects Churchill's exploration of sexual identity as fluid, relational, and political. Victoria. A non-entity in Act 1, a doll symbolizing female voicelessness, Victoria becomes a complex, conflicted woman in Act 2. She grapples with feminist theory, bisexuality, motherhood, and a liberal but insufficient marriage. Victoria's growth mirrors the emergence of second-wave feminism, with its emphasis on autonomy, solidarity, and personal choice. Lynn. Lynn is unapologetically lesbian, working class, and political. She raises a daughter alone and pursues Victoria with confidence. Lynn brings intersectional feminism into the play, highlighting how class and sexuality complicate feminist politics. Her child, Kathy, played by a man, mirrors the performative and socially constructed nature of gender from the earliest age. Martin. Martin is the prototype of the new man, progressive, communicative, supportive, on the surface. But his feminism is shallow. He intellectualizes women's experiences and still centers his own desires. Churchill uses Martin to critique male co-optation of feminist discourse and the gap between theory and practice. Themes and analysis. 1. Gender as performance. Churchill's most radical innovation is her use of cross-gender casting to illustrate that gender is not biological but socially imposed. Betty, played by a man, performs ideal femininity as dictated by Clive. Edward, played by a woman, demonstrates that even boys are expected to repress vulnerability and desire. This theatrical device anticipates the work of theorists like Judith Butler, who argue that gender is performative, not innate. The casting underscores how norms are internalized through repetition, expectation, and surveillance. 2. Colonialism and imperialism. Act 1 critiques British colonialism, portraying it not as noble conquest, but violent repression, both of colonized peoples and of self-expression. Joshua, a black servant played by a white actor, internalizes his subjugation. Clive's efforts to civilize the African landscape parallel his attempts to control his household. Colonialism and patriarchy are shown as mutually reinforcing systems of control. The gun aimed at Clive by Joshua at the end of Act 1 symbolizes the inevitable revolt against this oppression. 3. Sexuality and repression. Sexual desire pulses beneath the surface of Act 1. Only expressed in secrecy or shame. Ellen's love for Betty, Harry's bisexuality, Edward's queerness. In Act 2, sexual liberation is foregrounded, but not uncomplicated. The characters navigate non-monogamy, bisexuality, lesbian parenting, and gay male identity, but they still face emotional struggles and societal resistance. Churchill presents sexuality not as fixed, but evolving, experimental, and deeply personal. 4. Feminism and selfhood. Betty's arc, from Victorian wife to independent woman, is a microcosm of the feminist journey. Victoria's conflicted feminism reflects the challenges of reconciling ideology with lived experience. Churchill does not romanticize liberation. Feminist awakening is messy, nonlinear, and often painful. Yet it is also joyful, freeing, and essential for transformation. 5. Time and history. The surreal time jump between acts collapses centuries of progress into a single generational shift. This device emphasizes how social change can feel slow and fast at once, and how the past haunts the present. The embrace between Betty and her younger self signifies integration, a moment of healing that closes the loop between repression and freedom. 6. Theater as political tool. Churchill uses Brechtian techniques, nonlinear narrative, visible stagecraft, stylized dialogue, to create critical distance. The audience is not meant to lose themselves in the story, but to reflect, analyze, and question. This aligns with feminist and socialist dramaturgy, where theater is not entertainment but intervention, a means to expose ideology and imagine alternatives. Language and style. Churchill's dialogue is spare, witty, and often ironic. Characters express themselves in the language of ideology, desire, and self-deception. Act 1's formal, stilted speech reflects Victorian repression. Act 2's fragmented, informal dialogue mirrors the disorientation of postmodern identity. The shift in language underscores the play's central theme. Identity is shaped by discourse and social context. Conclusion. Caryl Churchill's Cloud 9 is a daring, incisive, and deeply influential play that dismantles the pillars of patriarchy, colonialism, and sexual repression. Through bold structural experimentation, radical casting choices, and complex character arcs, Churchill shows how identity is both constructed and contestable, shaped by history yet open to reinvention. Cloud 9 doesn't offer easy resolutions. Its characters struggle, contradict themselves, and carry their wounds. But it does offer the possibility of transformation, through confrontation, honesty, and solidarity. As a feminist, post-colonial, and queer classic, Cloud 9 remains startlingly relevant, reminding us that the clouds of ideology can be dispelled, not through escape, but through courageous and creative engagement with the self and the world.